So, South Africa exists today because of debating. Because leaders in our past chose to debate, to discuss, and to have discourse instead of violence, South Africa was able to make the transition from apartheid to democracy without civil war. It's unsurprising then that debating is something so central to the lives of so many South Africans. For example, the speakers that you're going to hear today have spent hours reading about how the world works and how it all fits together. They've spent hours watching themselves in mirrors, trying to catch that little thing they do with their hands that makes them slightly less convincing. They've spent hours training, practicing, and perfecting the way that they speak and the speaking ability they have. They will spend many hours more. Those are the hours that I put in when I was in school, and they're hours I still put in today. Debating plays a major role in creating debaters. This sounds pretty self-explanatory, debating, creating debaters. But you haven't yet met the special breed of person, the debater. The debater is someone who knows how the world works. They're conscious of the context of their country and how decisions made by our leaders and others are going to impact the lives of ordinary citizens. Debaters are forced to consider how communities deal with issues and how changes can be made to better those circumstances. The debater is the person who questions why things are the way they are, how they can be made better, and what would be required to make those things better. Now this means three things. Firstly, debaters are able to identify problems that need to be solved. This critical approach to the world is especially important in South Africa, where there is still so much more that needs to be fixed. This critical approach, however, is not the mindless opposition that is sometimes present in political discourse in this country. Instead, and this is the second thing, this critical approach is linked with awareness. An understanding of the way the world works and why it is that way is central. Without that awareness, you can't begin to change the way the world works. An understanding of the constraints that government and other key role players in our country face allow debaters to have realistic expectations of those role players. This means that the kinds of approaches and interactions that they have towards those role players are considerate of those constraints. This allows for more effective resolution of problems and might avoid some of the conflict that we've seen around service delivery. The third thing that debaters have is problem solving. Debaters develop critical thinking and analytical abilities that aren't created in South African classrooms. The rote learning that is encouraged in many schools does not develop a learner's capacity for critical thought. Problem-solving capacity means that debaters are able to take problems and find innovative solutions to them. The work of NGOs across the country in finding new ways to deal with HIV/AIDS, new ways to approach education, and new ways to deal with problems of service deliveries are only some options. All in all, debaters are better equipped to identify problems, demand solutions to those problems effectively and realistically, and solve those problems for themselves. It is no mistake that people who have been heavily involved with debating often go on to be involved in politics, either as political analysts or as politicians themselves, go on to work in the development sector, or become lawyers. Debating inspires a need to make things better. While the traits of the debater can be found in people with other backstories, with different histories, with different pasts, debating is a surefire way to create this breed of person. And it sounds a little bit like a factory line, but that's the greatest part about debating. All the skills that it develops and personality traits it encourages are ones that ask you to question the world around you. One of the hardest things that debaters are asked to do is argue for the side they don't believe. Speakers who very passionately believe that every woman should have the right to abort a child that she feels incapable of bearing to term and raising is forced to argue that the state knows better and that the life of that child is more important than this woman's right to control her body. A speaker who thinks that the choice to become a sex worker is no choice at all, and that government ought to intervene and stop them from selling their bodies, is asked to argue that prostitution should in fact be legal. This is incredibly difficult, but it develops an important level of understanding. While writing this speech, I thought empathy might be the right word for this, but I realized that that's exactly the wrong word. Empathy speaks to feelings and sharing the feelings of others. What is important is that you don't feel the same way as they do. Perhaps you don't think that abortion should be legal. Perhaps you don't think that every woman should have the right to sell their body. Feeling is not what's important. The point is that you can't feel the way that they feel. What you can do And what debaters do is understand the arguments for why someone would feel that way. This turns debates and decisions away from the realm of emotion and turns it instead to a reasonable discussion about what is best for our country. Being able to understand the arguments for the other side makes you question your side more, makes you better develop the arguments for your side, and allows you to better show that your approach is in fact the correct one. What debating creates is a critical citizenry. The changes that need to be made and the work that needs to be done in South Africa need to not only come from government. The citizens of our country need to push and work for change. Debaters are the kinds of people that are willing to do that pushing and do that work. Debating is very strong in South Africa. From across the country, there are more than 250 schools that are involved in debating. There are 5 provinces with established provincial boards and regional structures, and there are plans to develop the structures and systems in the remaining 4 provinces. These debating structures all affiliate with the South African Schools Debating Board. This is the organization that I work with. The South African Schools Debating Board manages debating across the country, ensuring that provincial boards host provincial tournaments, that South African teams are selected, and that highly skilled coaches are available, that the national competition has a high standard of motions and adjudication, and that generally debating in South Africa remains at the high quality that it is currently. This is the first part of our job, maintaining the debating that already exists. To do this work, we have the help of very dedicated people across the country. These people in the provincial boards put hours of their time into making the structures of debating work and work well. The second part of our job is developing debating structures and skills in areas that don't yet have access to them. In provinces with established debating boards, work is done to provide debating to development speakers. Development speakers, in the eyes of the SASDB, are speakers who go to schools without the finances to afford coaching, registration for competitions, or even transport to these tournaments. Many of these speakers also only speak English as a second or third language. The Township Debating League in the Western Cape, which has now been running for 10 years, is an example of how these debating structures can be provided to learners without access. Exciting new developments in the KwaMashu Debating League in KwaZulu-Natal and a new development league that is to be supported by the Constitutional Court in Gauteng give hope that this access is broadening. The SASDB also places a 50-50 development quota for each province attending the national competition. As evidence of these development structures being effective, the captain of the Free State delegation last year was a development speaker, and a development speaker was selected entirely on merit for one of the top 3 South African teams this year. This is an indication of successful development work. In addition to the individual leagues and provincial training, the SASDB organizes an annual training academy for the top development speakers across the country. At this academy, learners are given some of the top coaching that this country can provide, along with the opportunity to visit parts of the country that they may never have had the opportunity to see otherwise. At the end of this academy, a team is selected to represent South Africa in the international arena. These speakers are then able to take the international exposure they gain back to schools and enhance debating structures in those communities. It is important to put all of this in perspective. Internationally, South Africa is in the top bracket of countries at the World School Debating Championships. There are 5 other countries in this bracket: Australia, England, Singapore, New Zealand, and Canada. The other countries in this top 6 all have a single official language. That's English. More than that, for most of these countries and the other 50 to 60 countries who compete at the World Schools Debating Championships, debating is a private school sport. There are very few regional or national structures that help the development of debating in those countries. Teams that attend these international competitions are often selected at a league level rather than at a national level, like in South Africa. This means that the impact and the reach that debating has in South Africa is far stronger than in other countries. More than that, the approach taken to development speakers in our country is unlike any other country. No other country has the structures and policies in place to develop speakers who otherwise would not have access. This is something that South African debating deserves to be congratulated for. The question that remains is, what does this mean for you? How can you get involved? Firstly, we're always looking for people to be involved in debating structures and help with work that needs to be done. Passionate, motivated, and creative people are always welcome, and your help would be greatly appreciated. Secondly, help in the form of funding or in kind would have a massive impact on how well we are able to create access for learners in South Africa. What is particularly helpful is funding that allows learners to take part in the national competition, the National Academy, and attend competitions internationally. Finally, and most importantly of all, you can all be debaters. This doesn't mean you all need to run off and join or create debating societies, although I suggest this. This means that you should all work hard to fit the breed of debater. You can all work to be critical thinkers, to be aware of the world you live in, and to work to make things better. Our country is desperately in need of these fantastic, critical, exciting, creative breeds of people. Working to play a role as an active citizenry and solve the problems that face us is what it means to be a debater. What can you do? Be a debater. Thank you.